Welcome in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I am your host, Matt Duralde, coming at you with a solo episode today, previewing the Thursday night matchup of the Cowboys at the Giants. Dallas is a 5.5 point favorite in this game with an over-under of 44.5. Both teams are 1-2 to start the season. Cowboys have won 13 of their last 14 matchups against the Giants and their last 6 in a row. Last year, they put up 40 points and 49 points against them, respectively. Not sure if they have the same firepower as they did last year, but that is just incredible. On the other side, Giants have lost 8 straight Thursday night games, which is just brutal. I know teams don't always love playing on Thursday night, but come on, you got to get at least a couple wins out of that. That's a little bit pathetic. Looking at the quarterbacks in this matchup, we've got Dak Prescott as our QB6 this week, so a must start in all formats. He's coming off a 29-point fantasy game against the Ravens, but a lot of that was in garbage time. They were down 28-6 with those 6 points coming off field goals through the first 3 quarters. So yeah, I mean, a lot of those were kind of inflated stats, but to Dak's credit, I mean, they did battle back in a way that made that game interesting at the end. I know recovering an onside kick isn't always going to happen, but at least they showed some fight in them. Against the Giants, this is a pretty neutral matchup defensively. Unfortunately, we just don't really know what version of Dak is going to show up. We know he can light the world on fire in some games, and we know he can look pretty bad in others. We got Daniel Jones. After a rough week 1 against the Vikings, Daniel Jones has put up 18 and 19 fantasy points the last 2 weeks, throwing 2 touchdowns in each of those games with no interceptions. Cowboys are the 14th ranked pass defense, so kind of a neutral matchup, but they've also faced Deshaun Watson. They've also faced Lamar Jackson in a game where he only had to throw the ball 15 times. This week, we have Daniel Jones as our QB 22. Trevor was a little bit higher on him than I was, actually. So kind of a borderline start in Superflex leagues. If you are a Superflex player and are considering him, just drop a comment with the other guy that you're considering him over, and we'd be happy to kind of give you our rankings. Or you can check our QB rankings video we did a couple days ago that dives a lot deeper into a lot of these guys. Moving over to the running back position, we've got Rico Dowdle. I do think that Dowdle passed the eye test last week, even though it wasn't the best stat line. He only got 11 touches for 56 yards through the ground and through the air, but I think this is the week that we see him to continue to separate himself from Zeke a little bit in terms of playing time, snap share, touches, things like that. Zeke has just not really looked good. I think he's pretty washed up. Probably doesn't need to be on any rosters if he is at this point. We've got Dowdle is the RB31 this week, so kind of a low-end flex option. The problem is you don't want to start Thursday night players in your flex, so if you are having to play him, make sure you get him in that RB spot, but I don't know. I think if he doesn't score in this game, he's going to be a pretty big disappointment. Even if he does look good and puts up like 70 total yards, I don't know how much that moves the needle, but if you're desperate, could see that being a decent play and a good matchup. Zeke, like I mentioned, don't start Zeke. On the other side, Devin Singletary, we have him as the RB25 this week and am considering pushing him up a couple spots. He's coming off back-to-back games of 16 rush attempts and a touchdown, scoring 16 and 14 half PPR points in those contests. Cowboys are the worst team in the league at stopping the run. They are dead last in rushing yards allowed. So I think this is a very good matchup for Singletary. And a lot of people that drafted Devin Singletary were those who went with either hero running back teams or zero RB teams. And if that was one of you, you picked a good one with Singletary, because I know some of you were making that decision between him and someone like a Zamir White, which obviously has not paid dividends. So I think if he's on your team, he's a pretty decent start this week. Moving over to the wide receiver position, we've got CeeDee Lamb. You're always starting CeeDee, and I think this could be a get-right game for him. He has been disappointing so far this season. He's the wide receiver 19 on the year, and that would be even lower if it wasn't for that long touchdown in week 2. We have seen with some of the holdout guys them getting off to slower starts, but we saw last week with Jamar Chase just explode against Washington, so I think CeeDee can be in for a similar type performance against New York. We did see he and Dak get into it a little bit on the sideline last weekend, so I think that can kind of light a fire under both of those guys, and I would expect a heavy dose of targets to CeeDee Lamb in this game. Brandon Cooks, don't start Cooks. He hasn't really done anything the last 2 weeks after a good week one. Jalen Tolbert, he's at 11 fantasy points the last 2 games, so it could be a sneaky play if you're desperate. Now, if he is on your waiver wire and you don't plan to start him, and you're thinking about maybe getting ahead of the wire a little bit, you're someone that likes to kind of play towards next week while it's still in the current week, maybe pick them up if you've got the bench space, right? If you've got a couple guys that are in your IR spots because they're missing games and you've got the ability to have him in there. I think that's someone that maybe you see if this production continues and you can get ahead of the wire next week if he does have a good game. Now, just be aware that if you do pick him up, he's going to be locked in until Tuesday morning. So if you don't have that flexibility, don't constrain your roster. On the other side, Malik Neighbors, he's the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy right now. So obviously a must start. Leads the NFL with 37 targets, 5 clear of the next best receiver in terms of targets. And he has just looked absolutely incredible. We all knew about the talent heading into the draft. We were a little bit wary of him joining forces with Daniel Jones, but I think if Daniel Jones can just continue to be good enough to get him the ball, that's all he really needs. And I think he has the upside to finish as the wide receiver 1 on the year. And I wish I would have ranked him higher preseason. I think I got to check my final rankings, but I think I had him at like 24 or something, which is just absolutely absurd, especially as someone who typically pushes up rookies. So biting my tongue on that a little bit, but we march on. Wan'Dale Robinson, he's kind of a sneaky PPR start, but not really a whole lot of upside. He had a quiet week 2 from a reception standpoint, even though he did score a touchdown in that week, but caught 6 passes week 1, 7 passes week 3. So if you're desperate, you've got guys like Kupp and Debo out, and you are, especially in full PPR, need someone that can give you maybe a decent floor, go ahead. I hope you have better options, but not the worst option in the world. Moving on to tight end, we've got Jake Ferguson. You're starting Ferguson. He's our tight end for this week, and we did do those rankings assuming that McBride is going to play. Otherwise, he would be our tight end 3. Tight end has been a wasteland this year, and last week he had 11 targets with 6 catches and 95 yards. I understand a lot of the production from Dallas came in garbage time, but we've seen for, be a good player. And I was a little bit worried about that injury that he suffered, but he looked good last week. If he is the consistent number 2 option on this offense, I think we can easily see a top 5 tight end season from Ferguson, especially given how the position looks right now. Not starting any of the Giants tight ends. I did want to call out, we never talk about kickers, but Sleeper posted a stat on Twitter the other day that Brandon Aubrey would be the wide receiver 4, tight end 1, RB6, and QB 16. I'm not 100% sure the scoring they use for this, but that is just crazy. So if you have them on your team and you are in a league that still uses kickers, you are in a very good spot. And with that, that is the Thursday night preview. Best of luck if you've got any of these guys going tonight.